in our lifetime, we want our children to be able to see Palestinian families reuniting, people returning to Palestine. And we also do this work because it is a battle for the soul of what it means to be Jewish.
Hello and welcome to JVP Radio, a podcast from Jewish Voice for Peace, the world's largest Jewish organization standing in solidarity with Palestine. I'm Rosa Schwartzberg, and on today's podcast, we're going to be diving into one of JVP's central campaigns, the Break the Bonds campaign. Across the U.S., states and cities invest hundreds of millions of public dollars in unrestricted loans that goes directly into the Israeli treasury, providing financial support for all aspects of violence against Palestinians. But recent divestment wins in North Carolina, Michigan, and Minnesota prove it's possible to cut off this pipeline. Today, we're going to hear how divestment works, why it's a critical tool to end the ongoing apartheid system, and talk about why we should be looking to it to end the ongoing genocidal war against the Palestinian people. My co-host, Noemi Hakim Safati, and I are going to talk to JVP's strategic campaigns organizer, Dani Noble. Dani is a longtime labor organizer and member of the pro-Palestine movement. I'm very excited to share our conversation with you. We'll be touching on some terms and concepts that might be new to some listeners. That's why, as always, we'll have resources where you can learn more about all of what we discuss linked in our show notes. Dani, thanks so much for being with us.
So excited to be here.
Dani, I'd love to just start with hearing a little bit about you. Could you tell me a bit about how you came to the movement for Palestinian liberation and what brought you into JVP?
I was very, very lucky that I came of age in a family, in a Jewish household, really after the political mentors, so to speak, of the family had already been through a process of becoming anti-Zionist. When I was really getting politicized and I was starting to really question how the world worked, etc., as a young teenager, I was also spending a lot of time with my aunt and uncle, who really became political mentors and I think life mentors for me. And they were some of the first organizers of one of the first, if not the first, desegregated teachers union in Philadelphia.
Wow.
And so it was just logical that when we started talking about Palestine and Israel, that it was so obvious to me that, of course, if Cy and Lois are telling me about their experience with Israeli apartheid and how one of the core parts of actualizing Jewish values in the world is fighting against the evils of racism, of apartheid, of the occupation, the destruction of Palestinian families. And they really made the decision later in life after going to Palestine and Israel, after seeing what they saw in their 50s, made a decision coming back from those trips that this is apartheid, this is wrong. I think that they exemplified the humility of having the experience of seeing the injustice of what the Israeli military and government are doing to the Palestinian community, to Palestinian families, and to change your mind to the point where you dedicate the rest of your life to working for justice. It shows us the power of seeing and bearing witness to what Israeli apartheid, occupation, and genocide look like, and knowing that people have the capacity and Jews have the capacity to bear witness to those horrors and decide that something must be done and that we have to dedicate everything in our lives to change it. But I think just to connect it to JVP specifically, when we made the decision, my husband and I, to settle down and thinking about where we wanted to build community, and Philadelphia was really a place where made a lot of sense, not just because of my family, but also because it was a place where we believed that we could really have our children have the experience of growing up in Jewish community that really exemplified the values that we wanted to teach them. And having a strong JVP chapter is such a big part of that.
It's so beautiful. It's amazing that you have different generations like transmitting that legacy to you.
You know, many of us who have been involved, organizing in our communities in our lifetime. We want our children to be able to see, Palestinian families reuniting, people returning to Palestine. And we also do this work because it is a battle for the soul of what it means to be Jewish and for Judaism and Jewishness. And I want my daughter to be proud to be Jewish. I want her to want to tell the world that she is Jewish because she can stand fully 10 toes down in that tradition of the Myra Wolfgangs and, all of the Rosa Luxemburgs and all of the amazing, Jewish women who have fought for a better world, and get to tell her kids about where she was when the apartheid wall came down.
So beautiful. This episode is about campaigns, and there's many ongoing campaigns at JVP. Today we decided to talk about JVP's Break the Bonds campaign. Could you tell us what exactly are Israel bonds, and why has JVP made them the target of one of its core campaigns?
Absolutely. Okay, I'm gonna tone shift here.
Yeah.
We still have some tears in our eyes, but it's important to be grounded in why we do the things that we do, because it can be tedious and hard to eke out wins. And the call for Israel bonds divestment, just to say off the bat, is just one call for one form of divestment campaign in response to the call for boycott, divestment, sanctions, which I know we're going to get into in a little bit. Israel bonds are direct loans to the Israeli military and government. They are direct loans to the Israeli treasury. They don't have any conditions or guardrails. After the Nakba, right, which is Arabic for catastrophe, and Palestinians use to describe the violent expulsion of nearly 1 million Palestinians from their homes by Zionist militias, and the massacre of many Palestinians as well in that process. The individuals, organizing this colonial project, right? Literally the project of building the Israeli state quite literally on the ruins of Palestinian homes and villages. I think it's important to recognize. They needed money to be able to build this project, and they needed the buy-in politically from the US Jewish diaspora. And those things went together, right? Because this was also a massive potential source of resources for this project. And so Israel Bonds was created as a way of doing both of those things, of both raising money and of creating a really like a cultural tie between the American Jewish community and the project of Israel. For so many in our grandparents and our parents' generation, becoming active in your synagogue and being a contributor to your synagogue meant raising money through Israel Bonds.
I didn't realize it was so old.
Yes, 1951. I'm thinking of one story in particular of an organizer who has participated some in the Pennsylvania Break the Bonds campaign, who remembers being gifted by their grandmother, I believe, a charm bracelet. Each of the charms were supposed to represent an amount of money that you raised for Israel Bonds.
Oh my God. Talk about cultural ties.
Yes, talk about cultural ties. Over time, over decades, Israel Bonds really shifted from, individuals to institutions to be able to secure bigger and bigger institutional investors outside of the American Jewish community. And so here we start to see a transition to public government institutions like counties, like state treasuries, like pension funds, to be able to invest bigger and bigger amounts of money. Some of the biggest institutional investors in Israel Bonds are, for example, Palm Beach County, Florida.
Oh.
Which has, I believe, nearly $800 million in Israel Bonds. And for example, the New York State Pension Fund, which holds nearly 400 million. This call for Israel Bonds campaign is one that JVP is a part of, along with many partners in the movement, because of how vital it is that we in the United States, in thinking about the most strategic contribution that we can make, how cutting off this particular form of material support is so crucial to doing our modest but important role in terms of ending US complicity, because Israel bonds provide crucial material support for the Israeli military and government.
I was wondering about that. Yeah. If we know where the money is going precisely or not.
I mean, that's one of the most disturbing aspects of that, Noemi, is because there are no restrictions. But basically what Israel bonds are, Israel bonds have raised or claim to have raised over $51 billion since they started, right? And we're talking about $8 billion just since the Israeli military started the genocide in Gaza in 2023. Through selling these bonds, the Israeli military and government can go into debt to fund all parts of their program of violence against Palestinians. They can continue the horrific bombardment of Gaza that is literally annihilating families, and they can continue upholding racial segregation and apartheid without fear of international pressure and isolation, because you have a slush fund that you can continue to use for whatever you see fit. There's a reason why this call for Israel bonds is coming out with such a powerful coalition that includes JVP, but so many other Palestinian-led and Muslim-led organizations and human rights organizations, is because so much of these funds that the Israeli military and government are using as their slush fund to fund this violence are coming from the US. In addition to that, thinking about our own role specifically as a Jewish organization of Jews and Allies for Palestinian Freedom, having that material impact to be able to cut off this crucial flow of funds coming from our, in some cases, cities, right? Our counties, but also cutting the cultural ties that have historically, bound the US Jewish community up, and our traditions and worship and religious practices and spiritual practices bounded up in material support of the Israeli military and government. Like, we are determined to be the last generation for whom that is true.
For decades, Israel bonds have played a really important role in Jewish life. What is it like for JVP members, but just, Jews in general, all of us here, to discover that we or close family members own these bonds? And what is the importance of confronting the political project behind a bond that may have been given as like a bar bat mitzvah gift, a graduation present? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on that.
The main goal in focusing on, Israel bonds divestment and focusing on institutional divestment, right? Holding our communities, our governments, responsible for their complicity and their purchase of Israel bonds and direct funding of the Israeli military and government. That's the goal. Yeah. And also, we have members who were gifted Israel bonds for their B'nai Mitzvot, which are coming of age ceremonies. I remember the story of one person was talking to their mom about a potential Israel bonds divestment campaign focused on their municipality. And their mom mentioned that they had one in their name that was still active, and, said to them, what do you want me to do with this? And then it becomes this weight of, how do I make sure that, quite literally, not in my name, how do I make sure that the beautiful memory of my bar mitzvah is not now tied up as well in materially supporting what the Israeli military is doing to Palestinian families right now? We've had, members who have gone through the process of trying to sell them, before they expire, quote unquote, mature, which is very difficult, if not impossible to do. There was one member in particular who inherited a bond from a relative who passed away, and they sold it and gave it to Palestinian freedom organizing in the US, which I thought was really beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
In one of our previous episodes, Laura El-Keslasi was talking about how Zionism boils down to family bonds and how it's transmitted in the family, and how hard that makes it to extricate, It's really chilling. But I wonder if, actually, I would like to step back a little bit and talk about BDS, because you've mentioned that Break the Bonds is one campaign and one strategy among others as part of BDS, which is boycott, divestment, sanctions. And I'd like to, I'd like for you to give us an overview of what is the thinking behind BDS and what it is, if you don't mind.
The movement for BDS, which stands for Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions, is modeled after the movement to end South African apartheid, but it also builds on tried and true nonviolent tools for social change that we have seen work in many, many contexts, including the farm workers movement here in the United States, the movement to end segregation in the Jim Crow South. As communities and, organizers at the grassroots level, we have the power where we sit to be able to together execute economic pressure campaigns that can go up against even the biggest of systems, of nations, of companies. The call for BDS is about doing our part in the international community where we're best positioned. So wherever we live, wherever we work, wherever we go to school, right, to pressure the Israeli military and government to follow international law and respect Palestinian human rights. The BDS call has 3 very basic demands. And those demands are: 1, end the occupation of Palestinian lands and dismantle the apartheid wall. 2, full equality for Arab Palestinian citizens, so an end to apartheid. And 3, the right to return, which is a right that is protected under international law. So a right for refugees to return. And so the idea is that until the Israeli government and military respects international law, respects Palestinian rights, we will ensure that there's not business as usual. And that means there's not economic partnerships as usual. There's not cultural events and partnerships as usual, because apartheid, because occupation of Palestinian land, because genocide is not business as usual. It must end, full stop.
I want to hear more about local organizing. I'm curious. It seems like one specificity of the Break the Bonds campaign is that it's made to be adapted locally. And I'd like to hear your story of how the Break the Bonds campaign has been going in Philadelphia. I've heard that you've taken on the state's treasury. I'd like to hear that story. And I also want to get a sense of what it felt like.
The campaign for Break the Bonds Pennsylvania, which really focuses on our state treasury's investments, which is hovering around $65 million in Israel bonds. That campaign was really born out of a coalitional action that happened in the wake of when the Israeli military was starting the genocide, and the action that happened in early of 2024, where different partners in the movement, the Philly Palestine Coalition, our partners at CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and JVP Philadelphia, JVP Pittsburgh came together with the leadership of local Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim organizers to think about how we could be really focusing on ending material complicity where we lived. And Israel bonds was an obvious target because of the fact that our treasurer, Stacey Garrity, in the wake of the Israeli military starting the genocide in October 2023, decided to buy more in Israel bonds in really a show of support for the Israeli military and government. As someone who was literally looking on at the horrors of what the Israeli military was doing at that time, and had been organizing along with folks in my community, our partners, chapters and partners across the country, every minute of every day focused on doing our small part to try to end this genocide, seeing our own state treasurer giving the Israeli military and government more of our money without any process ask, but in a way that was so infuriating, disgusting to me personally. And I think we just knew that we had to do something about it. And I think later on in the course of the campaign, I'll just speak for myself again, it just got angrier and angrier all over again when we got back, for example, public records requests that showed the email exchanges between the treasurer and other members of her office and the Israel Bond sales representatives. One email was like, the treasurer or someone from their office basically communicates, hey, we want to buy another 20 million. Mm-hmm. We're waking up every day to images of the Israeli military bombing hospitals, of children and families sheltering in schools only to have those schools bombed. Someone from the treasurer's office basically says, we're looking to buy another 20 million. They get a response basically confirming, the 20 million has been settled. And there is a reply email from I think it's the chief investment officer who works, in the treasurer's office, who says, Mazel tov. Mm-hmm. Part of our job as organizers is to take that anger that we feel when we have those experiences and when the veil is lifted from what decision makers are actually doing and the casualness which they operate and the cozy relationship that they have with mm-hmm. Sales officers that are selling these bonds, and use that to motivate us and to fuel us to do hopefully strategic things to be able to end that complicity. A moment that I think particularly stands out to me was JVP Philly did an action in front of the Israel Bonds office in Philadelphia. We were basically using the themes of Rosh Hashanah, which, right, we're supposed mm-hmm. to answer the call of the shofar, right, the ram's horn, the ritual ram's horn that is used. It's a wake-up call, right? It's to mm-hmm. wake up our souls, right? Mm-hmm. The art team built this beautiful shofar, and we had, signs, and we're chanting with these like paper shofars. There was this beautiful singing in front of the office. Folks in the street were stopping and we were talking to them about what's going on. There's something very spiritual about it. Yeah. And I felt really, really proud to be Jewish in that moment. I felt proud to be part of JVP in that moment and be part of this movement. And, it's extremely important in campaigns that we act strategically to win and to actually end Israel bonds and, investment. And part of that is making sure that when we do act collectively, that we feel that way, that people feel that.
I love what you said about how we transform the grief and the anger into, we channel it into action is kind of like a good way to sum up the work of organizers, in my opinion. It's kind of like a magic kind of operation.
So we're in a really interesting moment here where across the political spectrum here in the US, people are asking their representatives to invest in communities over foreign militaries. It's making for a really interesting alignment between the right and parts of the pro-Palestine movement, which of course skews, pretty heavily left. I'm wondering if there are strategic possibilities that this opens up or conversations that this gives an entree point for.
That alignment, right, of what you described, of this general consensus that people in this country who work and who mm-hmm. also care about being able to feed their families and have a life where they don't just get by, but can think about the future mm-hmm. and actually be free. I mean, that's kind of what, are we really free if we're constrained and living paycheck mm-hmm. to paycheck? I think that alignment shows how popular this idea is, that we should not be investing in genocide in a foreign government. Just to think of an example, it's absolutely unacceptable that in Cleveland, Ohio, where there is a beautiful, shout out to the Ohio Divest and
mm-hmm. Cuyahoga County.
Cuyahoga County and and the No New Bonds campaign. It's absolutely unacceptable that you have counties that are investing millions of dollars in the Israeli military and government, while literally communities and families in Cleveland don't have proper roads or can't feed their families and don't have health care. It is absolutely outrageous. And there's widespread anger at seeing the influence of the Israel lobby, the influence of AIPAC, right? How much money we're giving to the Israeli military, billions of dollars, while literally at this moment, we have folks who are going hungry because of cuts to SNAP benefits. Mm-hmm. Just here in where I live, we have seen just in the past couple months, 2 community hospitals close. So now those communities don't have trauma hospitals because of cuts and corporate greed. I mean, in campaign work, right? Mm-hmm. We are trying to actually cut material support. We're trying to achieve a thing. We're mm-hmm. trying to shift power and conditions mm-hmm. in some way to change a reality. And part of campaign work is acting strategically to achieve those goals. And essential to that is having the amount of people and skilled people and building a base mm-hmm. to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so campaign work is really interesting in the fact that we need a powerful base. We need lots of people who are trained and unified and capable mm-hmm. Across different constituencies, communities, movements to win campaigns, to shift material conditions. And also campaigns help us actually do that building mm-hmm. because campaigns are a sharp, strategic, bite-sized way for people in our local communities to break down these larger goals of ending U.S. material support and mm-hmm. arming of Israel into something that is achievable and close to home. Because campaigns require so much different kinds of mm-hmm. work and organizing, it opens up and provides opportunities for people to take action and to contribute in a range of ways, which is really, really important for base building, because one of our jobs as organizers, again, if we are going to do our job and build a powerful base that is going to give us the power and the might to be able to do our job, again, our small, humble job in the movement for mm-hmm. Palestinian liberation right here in the US. And that means that people need to be able to fit in and contribute and take on leadership in a way that makes sense for them in terms of the skills that are required for that, in terms of what they feel called to do, what they're good at. Campaigns provide those opportunities.
Dani, could you explain some of the strategy behind these ongoing campaigns? And what are some examples that come to mind?
Absolutely. A campaign is a time-bound organizing effort with a specific target, right? Someone who can give you what you want, and a specific demand, a thing you want them to do. We have many different goals when we organize strategic campaigns, right? The 10 plus different Israel bonds divestment campaigns at the local level, from, Miami to North Carolina to New York State to Albany, right? All of these campaigns have many different goals and things they're accomplishing at the local level. We also know that there's many, many other goals that we have in the course of doing local campaign work that enable us to build power, capacity, skills, to get public opinion on our side, to do the cultural decoupling, in our case as a Jewish organization, of Zionism and Jewishness, to build the number of people that are working on the campaign and are skilled and ready to do that. Mm-hmm. Just to give an example, right? A really powerful campaign that is active right now in the ecosystem of Israel bonds, of Break the Bonds campaigns, of Israel bonds divestment campaigns, is the Break the Bonds New York State campaigns, mm-hmm. which is mainly anchored by JVP chapters and DSA chapters across New York State, mm-hmm. Including Syracuse, Buffalo, Hudson Valley, and Albany. And it's just an incredibly powerful campaign that involves public sector workers, involves community members, calling on the state comptroller, Thomas DiNapoli, to stop buying Israel bonds. New York State, as I've mentioned before, is one of the biggest institutional investors, and continues to invest in Israel bonds even in the wake of the New York City comptroller, Brad Lander, the past New York City comptroller, Brad Lander, standing by his decision to discontinue the city pension fund's relationship with Israel bonds. The North there is ending New York State, the New York State pension funds, material support for the Israeli military and government in the form of Israel bonds and getting Tom and Napoli to stop buying them. Mm-hmm. New York public sector workers, Jews, allies, community members do not want their public dollars being used without restriction to fund genocide, apartheid, and in these poor performing investments that are investing in Israeli apartheid and not prioritizing communities in New York. And also, there are so many aspects of that campaign that are building power and connections and capacity across the state. And in addition, really make clear that Jewish opinion in the United States is changing. Jewish New Yorkers and Jews everywhere in the United States, we do not want our money to be used to fuel Israeli apartheid, to fuel occupation, to tear families apart, to fund genocide. Not in our name, not ever, period, full stop. And that's part of what they're doing in that campaign as well.
Where should people start with getting involved in this work?
The best thing that you can do is to get involved with your local JVP chapter or other local organization for Palestinian freedom to get engaged in campaign work. We should never do this stuff on our own. We do it in organization and in formation. To learn more about Break the Bonds and see some links to local and state campaigns, you can go to jvp.org/break-the-bonds-divest.
And we'll have a link to that in our show notes.
You can become a member of JVP at jvp.org/join-us. And also you can see a map of local JVP formations to understand if there's one in your community. There's a whole process of being able to get set up with a one-on-one and be able to get connected with JVP chapter in your community.
Amazing. Dani, thank you so much. Thank you for talking with us.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that we got to talk to Dani and that we got to share our conversation with her with all of you. You can find out more about Break the Bonds, divestment strategies, and how to get involved at the links in our show notes. Or you can write to us at podcast@jvp.org. In our next episode, we'll be diving more into JVP's campaigns work, focusing on the partnership between JVP's Seattle chapter and the Palestinian-led group Washington for Peace and Justice. This episode was produced by Rosa Schwartzberg and edited by Feivel Rothberg. Hosted by Noemi Hakim Salfati and Rosa Schwartzberg. Theme music Le Galérien by Eleanor Vey. Art by Leora Ostroff.